Laptop computer spins onto the screen, opens, and displays ATP Education Program webinar series, closes, and then spins off the screen.
Welcome to Section 5 on the series of Adoption versus Abandonment. In this section, we are going to discuss implementation of assistive technology and how that can help us tip the scales on one side towards the other. Hello, I am Sayard Bass. I'm here leading you through Section 5. I do have my bio here if you need to know more about me. So as we reach this stage, as far as implementation or putting technology into place, the one objective that I do have is I'd like you to understand and be able to list the 5 pieces of a successful implementation plan. And I went with some of the research done by Socol in 2008 for this. And I think that it covers a lot of the bases and makes connections to a lot of the research that's been done on adoption and abandonment of assistive technology. An implementation plan is something that needs to be 2 things. One, it needs to be usable, or no one's going to get it out. And it needs to be dynamic, meaning that it does have some flexibility and it can change as long as different needs might crop up for the student throughout the school year or as their technology use changes. Implementation is one of those areas that does have one of the quality indicators of assistive technology dedicated to it. So when we look at those considerations, I outlined the best practices from Quiet as well as the common errors. And I really like this, that we have to be collaborative. Remember, it can't be one person. We need to integrate the technology into the environment. It can't be something that's just pulled out and used separately. Shared responsibility, so they're re-emphasizing can't be one person. We're using multiple strategies because we know that our school day is dynamic, so we need to have multiple ways to use something, multiple ways to get it into action, to get to an area of being strategic about assistive technology use. We need to give the student learning opportunities, make sure we're taking data, and manage the equipment, make sure that it's taken care of and not broken. So I just wanted to outline those quickly because the quality indicators have taken implementation heavily into consideration. Plans for implementation can get very detailed. I know in meeting with some of my assistive technology colleagues, we like to bring out new forms and say, look at this thing I came up with, and sometimes we immediately laugh because it's something that's multiple pages and stapled together, and we laugh because we say the teachers aren't going to do this. The students are not going to look at this. The parents aren't going to look at this. I'm not going to look at this again. It's basically you've answered a lot of questions, you've provided a lot of information, and it's all good quality stuff, but it might not be usable. We need to make sure that our implementation plan is concise and addresses the most important factors, because that makes it more likely that it will be used, which leads to less likely that the technology will be abandoned because of something on that implementation plan being missed. We need to make sure everyone's on the same page. This doesn't happen in every school, but I have been on teams where sometimes it's the blame game when a parent comes in and says, why hasn't this technology been used? And if everyone's on the same page, it kind of gives it a team responsibility. It's not just one person that can be pointed at. Or I know a phrase that's become very popular at a building I previously worked at was, you don't want to throw someone under the bus. So we need a consistent framework to make sure that we get all those questions and details for every student, and that it's something we can put into action. With an implementation plan, I'd like to say it's time consuming and worth the time, because if you can go through and get all the information in there and then edit down to what you really need, you're going to have a powerful tool to help influence adoption of technology. So here we go. This is our objective. This comes from Socol's tool belt theory in 2008. And from an evidence-based perspective, these are the parts of an implementation plan. And notice that they do link back to most of the research we have seen on adoption and abandonment. It's addressing those factors. We have to take a look at the equipment itself, which we know that Right now, that could be something physical that could be handled. It could be something cloud-based as we keep making advances. We need to understand the student because that's how we're coming up with all of this assistive technology in the first place. The student's going to be a very key part to making assistive technology work. The school, which also can equate to being the environment. We know that implementation might look different within different classrooms even. We need to think about the parents. What are we needing to do with them to make sure that they are part of the team and that they are included so they can support the student and hopefully create extensions beyond just using the assistive technology at school. And finally, data, which is important because we want to show if something works or not. So when coming to the equipment, this is a nice list of questions. You do not need to ask all of them. This is where I kind of bring up editing. This might be something great to discuss with the team or anyone who is dealing with the equipment. We do know that under IDEA that the device and any consumable supplies needed should be supplied by the educational organization. There are exceptions. Sometimes parents will say, hey, we have this at home and we want it to be used at school and at home. So that needs to be documented. We need to know who owns or rents it, which becomes exceedingly important as students get close to transition age. I hate it when we get to that point where a student's about to graduate and some school districts will allow parents to purchase equipment. Others, that's not completely an option because of some ownership rights. Transferring an iPad is quite a pain and a headache, but we need to know what that plan is for the equipment itself. Where the student will use it. Are they going to need some type of waiver or some type of setup so they can use it as home as well? Because accomplishing homework is something that's expected for your access to a free and public education. Do we need to adapt or modify it, or can it be used just like it is off the shelf? Who's responsible for repairing it? And what is the backup plan? Now, even though I said some of these questions are optional, I think that backup plan, if the device is not working, is one that I like to ask or have answered for every student. And sometimes it's, okay, if this isn't working, then we need to get a human in to support, and that's fine. We just need to know and have it documented that that is our plan in the moment if the power goes out. For the student, we need to identify who's going to be supporting them, whether it's the student has a paraprofessional, maybe a student help desk that they go to, a case manager, a resource teacher, someone for them to check in with. This is also a great place where if a student is receiving related services, the speech therapist, the OT, the PT can check in with them and help them learn those maintenance activities. Next, we have to look at who's going to train the student, how much training is required, when it will be provided, because we know that if a student is just handed a device, there are some kids who will pick it up and play with it and figure it out because they have the motivation to do the task. There are others that are going to need more explicit instruction. Are there any technology skills they need to learn? I mean, thank goodness things are getting much easier. I look at older programs and almost reminds me of my friends who work in computer sciences where they have to learn different programming languages. Is it something that the student is going to need to put a lot of effort into? And are they ready to put that effort in? How are they going to use it in their environment? I've worked with students who might want to change their position within the classroom, some who prefer to go out in a hallway if they're using assistive technology, especially if they are dictating or listening and no one else is wearing headphones. So we need to make sure that the student has some input and some agency so they feel comfortable with that use. And then, are they going to need help to set up and use that device functionally? There are some things that students do a great job getting out and setting up. There are other things that, due to device weight or what the nature of the device is, a student might need a person to help them set it up. And discussing that ahead of time is going to make it less likely that you're going to have the student get upset or embarrassed, shut down, and decide they're not going to use their technology. Next, you have to identify the adults who will require training. And this has to fall back to it can't be one person. We have to have other people who know how the device is used, because this is a great opportunity for students to kind of slip away and say, I'm not going to use my device, but nobody else here knows how to use it, so that gets me out of using it. Very tricky, but at the same time, very smart. So we need to know that there are adults there who can instruct, who can cue, who can help a student work into what they need to use. What do the staff members or family need to know about it? Do they just need to know how to turn it on, how to charge it? Or do they need to know specific features within the device? And then who's doing the training? Like I said in another section, device companies are really great about putting out some instructional videos, especially with YouTube, on company websites, even contacting a company or manufacturer. You might be able to get a representative who can walk you through a program, but finding someone or some way to get an across-the-board training is definitely beneficial when you have a student who might be the only one in the classroom using a certain technology. Definitely, we have to make sure that it is a team effort with the student, the family, and the school, because if it's one person, it's a lot more likely that the student is going to go longer without support or feel that they can't ask for support because they're not necessarily seeing that one person every day. And we move in here, we got to talk about the parents. I know I've mentioned them briefly before in some of these other slides, but what do we need to give to the parent to make them successful? I know in an earlier module I did mention that socioeconomic status can play a big role in whether assistive technology gets used or not. I think that highlighting everything that's happened with remote learning in the recent past, we have to understand that a family might not have the internet or Wi-Fi that's needed for a program to run at their home. Is there something we need to work with to make sure that something is functional? And sometimes the students are not the best reporters of that. It might be embarrassing to them with their peers, but if we can connect with the family and help them understand why a device is needed, why it's being used, we can definitely find those ways to help them. So we started with, hey, let's make an implementation plan, and here we are, maybe pulling in the social worker to say, are there services or something that we can get for the family? Setting up training for parents and families is very different than for staff because we can't mandate them to come in and sit down. They don't need it for continuing education to continue to be parents. And often parents have other kids, they have work schedules, so we have to be a little bit more flexible. Down here I have some suggestions like handouts with a lot of screenshots, having training nights. It's really great if you can get some snacks or some pizzas or something and kind of get the whole family in. I found that especially with AAC, that's something that families really engage in, as well as creating videos that you can send home. So there are a lot of things we can do to help promote the parent side of implementation as well, because regardless of the age or what a student might think of their parents, especially in those teen years, they do play a large influence on our students and what we see from them at school. I put a few links here as far as assistance that you can get outside of the IEP meeting. I did open these up in another window. The first is the Education Tech Points. It gives a very nice way to organize the implementation. And I told you, my friends and I, we will laugh at each other because we can come up with really great plans, but they end up being really long, really detailed, and is this going to be pulled out and used? It's great when you're sitting down and brainstorming and interviewing, but if you're going to make something functional, here I am at the end of the 4th page, you need to edit and figure out what information really needs to be given to the team. This is if you're going for the whole kit and caboodle. But remember, even if you collect all of this information, it's likely not going to be referenced by the team unless the assistive technology person is there or if something goes wrong. This is a nice collection. This comes from the Ed Tech Points from Oregon, and they have some really nice links here as far as how we can put together some of those key parts of an implementation plan. So these are great to check out. And then I have some information going a little bit further into Socol's tool belt theory. And this talks a lot about how we can use implementation and education of the tools in order to help students build their independence. So those are some great resources that are provided within the presentation. So our bonus activity, if you had a limited amount of space, I put one page on here, but really I think it's kind of fun to see if you can get it on a note card like the old math tests in high school. If you could create that one-page plan, what questions would you find the most valuable to add to your plan? And how would that change depending on your student, equipment, institutional, and parental factors? So I really like this exercise because it's saying, okay, if I'm looking at a certain type of student, a certain type of assistive technology, what is most important? And can I make that a little simpler so that it is also flexible and usable within that daily context? And that ends this section.
Thank you for watching. For more information on the ATP education program, please visit our website at atp.nebraska.gov/education or email us at atp.education@nebraska.gov.